Trying to get that.
Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt, the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, the book initiative that began when the stupid pandemic began. We were here to help bookstores who had to shutter their doors, authors who lost their tours, and readers who wanted to connect with authors. Today is really special because we have my friend, the brilliant author, Elizabeth Crane, and she's here with Pearl, her dog. Bosie Rand, our remarkable producer, who is also an author. Elizabeth Crane, let me tell you a little bit about her, is the author of 4 collections of excellent short stories. Turf, When the Messenger is Hot, which has one of the best titles I've ever heard. I think that was the first book of yours I read because I saw that title and thought, oh my God, this is so great. I have to read this. All This Heavenly Glory, and You Must Be This Happy to Enter, as well as 2 novels, We Only Know So Much and The History of Great Things, which also is a wonderful movie. Her stories have been featured on NPR Selected Shorts. She's also a recipient of the Chicago Public Library 21st Century Award, and her work has been adapted for the stage by Chicago's Steppenwolf Theater Company, and also adapted for film. She teaches in the UCR Palm Desert Low Residency MFA program. And another important thing that I want to say about Betsy is her cardigan collection. She's the only person beside me who has a collection of vintage cardigans, and hers are even cooler than mine.
Well, I don't want to interrupt, but Caroline gave me one of my favorite ones that I wear all the time.
Another even important fact is that Betsy is just a wonderful person, and I'm honored to know her. So this story will change. Let me get in the camera. This story will change is an extraordinary memoir about the kick in the head surprise that happens at the end of her marriage, and about what comes next and why and how. But more than that, it's really about the stories we tell ourselves and how there are different kinds of unexpected happily ever afters or not so happily afters. Kirkus raved about this book in a starred review. And as you all know, Kirkus is notoriously cranky. So to get a star from them is like the holy grail. Reading about another person's pain should not be this enjoyable, but Crane's writing, full of wit and charm, makes it so. Booklist also gave it a rave and a star in his gorgeous impressionistic memoir. Fiction writer Crane turns to nonfiction to investigate her marriage and its dissolution. She resists cliche and refuses easy resolution, offering instead a fractured yet richly drawn portrait of a painful year and its surprising gifts. Before I start to talk to Betsy, I want to tell everybody, buy this book. You can go to bookshop.org, which will direct you to your nearest indie, or buy it at your favorite indie, because that's who we at The Blaze support. So welcome, Elizabeth, and welcome.
Hi, Caroline. Thanks for having us.
So I know the answer to this question, and anyone who's read this book knows the answer to this question. But what was the why now moment when you knew you were going to write this memoir?
Well, I didn't know it would be worth publishing, but I this is what it was. I was about 6 months, in maybe not even that many, but it was a few months after my husband had moved out, and I was very sad, crying all the time.
Yes.
And I wanted to be writing, and I was sort of like feeling like I could be getting back to writing, but I couldn't think about anything else to write. I mean, I really didn't want to write this. I didn't want to write about this. I knew that like doing that on paper would be painful. It was painful anyway. And so I couldn't think about anything else. It was the only thing that I just couldn't focus on anything else. So I thought, well, at least if I write this down, maybe I can just put it aside and start getting back to some decent fiction or something. And then it went from there,
So I love that phrase in the title of The Story Will Change, because so much of the book, and actually so much of life, is about the stories we tell ourselves.
Very much.
There's a lot of fake happily afters that turn into real ones. There's a lot of catastrophizing. So I'd love if you talk about that, the whole notion of story and what it does for us.
Yeah, well, you know, that like the title, there's Pearl.
Hey, girl.
The title was really I knew that was one of the first little sections that I started to write, was about, you know, because I was in the middle of it. I knew that I didn't know exactly what the story was, you know. I That was part of why I wrote it, to try to sort of like put all these scenes down and, you know, see uh if any of it made sense to me, you know. Baby. um you know, so so that's what I did. But so with the understanding that like whatever I figured out would probably change before I was even finished with the book, you know, let alone
Just like life, just like life.
like life, let alone after the book, you know, like, or by the time the book would come out, if it was going to be a book, you know.
It was remarkable. I want to know, like, I want to talk about the structure that I just loved, because it's, first of all, it's so completely intimate, like we feel like we're across the table from you, but also no one is named. It's the husband, the wife, the bud, and that actually makes the story more universal. At least it did
Oh,
to me.
that's so
I felt it was
great.
like everybody's story. So when did you
I'm so
decide on
glad.
this structure and why?
You know, it was, you know, this is often, structure is often something that emerges in the course of writing something, because I was writing it in these short little bits, like, okay, well, this happened, maybe this was something, and that happened, and maybe that was something. And if it was going to be memoir, you know, I I I knew I probably didn't want to use everyone's real name, so it was just like a practical solution, you know. Um, and so that it functions in that way for a reader, I like hearing that. That's really nice. But the, you know, the 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 way the book is kind of organized was a lot of that was after the fact, you know, a lot of help of editors and that kind of thing.
So your story world, places really inform your writing a lot. Like we have Chicago, Texas,
I
Brooklyn,
cover all the places in this
yeah,
book. Yeah.
upstate New York.
Yeah.
There's good and bad stuff in each place. So I would love for you to talk about, I love you wiping the dogs.
I know.
This is how does place inform your writing?
Well, you know, you know what it is? I am very much affected by place, clearly, as I write in this book.
Yeah.
Sorry, Texas, but I'm trying to manage the dog at the same time. You know, I'm very affected by place. I was in love with Chicago. I'm from New York. I have a complicated relationship with New York, even though I love New York too. Um, you know, Texas, I wasn't happy there. I didn't know I wouldn't be happy there. Austin is a great city. It was just far away from my beloved Chicago. It was far away from friends and family. My father was sick at that time. You know, I actually like where I live too. You know, I live, you know, an hour and a half north of the city basically, and I'm able to have a house here, and you know, and it's affordable, and I like that. Um, it's a little more challenging as a single person, you know. I don't, you know, socialize, and then we had pandemic too, which didn't help. But
Right. That
you know,
kills it.
yeah, but I am close enough to a city where I do have a lot of friends and a familiarity, and you know, I mean, I like cities, you know, but place definitely, like Chicago was just like that was my place, and you know, it's
Yeah, it changes. It's funny. My first marriage, which broke up horrifically, I was living in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is supposed to be a really lovely city now.
I love
And
Pittsburgh, yeah.
I cannot, it's really hard for me to go back there
Mhm.
because every
Mhm.
time I even think of it,
Understandable, yeah.
those I
Understandable.
remember those days. So
Yeah.
it's just so interesting that place, place is not neutral. Place changes.
It's
Neutral.
not. But for example, I live in, this house, we still co-own it. He is among other things, he's a fine artist, but he's also a woodworker, and he's done, well, I mean, that's even in the book at the end, obviously, but like he's done all of the work on the house that we've done and continues to do that. And it's a funny thing. Like I went to the city after the marriage ended more to be among people. I was hard for me to be here and worry in a small place about running into him, but it was as much that I needed to be with friends. It was never that I was unhappy in the house itself, which is a place, right? I love my house. And I
Right.
love the town too. I don't have negative associations with the town where I live.
Yeah, yeah. So I also wanted to ask about how funny the book is about a really serious, sad, and traumatizing thing. So I was wondering, do you think that
Right.
humor is one of the things that always saves you? And did you realize that this book was going to be funny when you were writing it?
No, I thought it was going to be super depressing, and
It's not.
I didn't think that I didn't it's sometimes I don't have like when I'm writing something super sad, I don't have a sense until later that my humor is actually coming into it. But it absolutely is. I mean, I often tell this story about when my mom died, and I went to a grief support group in Chicago, and like the rest, surprise surprise, the rest of the support group did not appreciate my sense of humor. I was not making jokes about their deceased loved ones, but it's just it's just part of my process of life. Like things are funny to me. Not everything, trust me when I tell you, like I was so sad after this. I cried and cried and cried for the whole first year. But I also had a lot of joy and laughter because I have a good life. And so it's just impossible for me to separate that out. It's very much who I am. And then my friend came in who is also just a really funny person, and so I had to like include that.
That is like, yeah, I think one of the things we were talking about before we got on here is the writer Gina Frangella said, I've been every person in this book, and
Mm,
so have you. And when she said that, I thought, oh my God, that's so true. One of the things I love about that book is, as I told you, it has this quality of universality. It just, who in this world has not been left or done the leaving or lived in a place where they had to leave, where they didn't belong, or felt bereft or looked for hope. It's just,
that's
it's
so
just
wonderful.
so universal, and I think it's the same way with all the emotions in the book are universal. It's not like this terrible drag you down book. It's sort of this book about, if people didn't know you, it's this book about this incredibly engaging, thoughtful, smart, funny young woman who's going through this terrible thing and is struggling and is coming out in an unexpected way. And I think it's just beautiful. And I actually also want to ask anybody out there, if you have questions, please pop them in the chat. But anyway, the universality of it is just wonderful. And also the specificity. There's the next question I wanted to ask, is there are unexpected things that happen. Like the bud, his kid, and you are living in a Manhattan apartment and find a kind of trio, which was surprising and lovely. And that says a lot of things about different kinds of relationship, because I kept saying, oh, okay, this is the happy ending. And it is, but it's not the happy ending you expect. It's totally not.
Yes, and right. And that was something I actually had to think a lot about, because I knew that like there would be an inclination as a reader to be like, oh, she's meeting this new great guy, and that's going to be the
And he is a
unexpected.
great guy.
He
He's so
is a great guy. He is like one of my closest friends. But it was it wasn't time for me to get involved with someone else, first of all. And, we landed in this apartment, like, I mean, it was my friend's apartment, but that he was moving back just at the same. So this was this random kind of circumstances that collided, and he was just going to look for an Airbnb or rent a place, and then like a week later, we're like, we get along really well, I think. Yeah, and then and then it was 1 month and 2 months, and his daughter was there, and she, and so it was like this sitcom-y, like built-in support. That was a very unexpected turn of events that it's now looking back, like, no, thinking that I was just going to stay there by myself the whole time. I can't even imagine what that would have been like. I probably would have been maybe just as sad as I would have been alone in my in my upstate apartment house,
When you look back at your relationships, what did you discover about yourself from relationships, and how do you think you changed? Like, when do you feel like, well, I'm not going to put up with that anymore, or this is what I want now that I never wanted before?
Right. Well, I'm still figuring a lot of that out. Part of the thing was that my husband was really the relationship of my life. Everything I had before that, because I was 40 when we met, and I was very single, and I had dated a lot, and but I was not with anyone for any great length of time. And so this was the defining relationship for me to date. And I of course think about, I mean, like, what I hope is that these are questions and things that I'm looking at in the book, right? That like, okay, he made the choice to end the relationship, but but it's not in my nature to just say, like, okay, I can say, like, okay, that's painful. He made that choice, that he made was painful. It was very sudden, but it, it I have to look back and say, like, there were two people here, and both of us had always talked about how great our relationship was, and we were very compatible, and we got along really well. And it was not there was not any drama. So that's where I really was kind of like, certainly wasn't perfect, but I had to dig really deep to look at, okay, how did I participate in this? And the truth is, I think there was a lot that I didn't say. I think there was a lot that I didn't say, that I should have been more communicative about. And we really, I know that we did our best, because we both have some tools for how to communicate. But I still think that, I cannot speak for him, but I know for my part, if going into something else, if that should happen, I want to be more um communicative about my needs than I have been. And I really, I didn't think that I was kind of not asking for what I needed or wanted, but I realize now that there was a lot of sort of deeper level stuff that I wasn't talking about.
Where are you now in your healing?
Like, hard to say long term. I mean, it's been 4 years. I will say this: I felt very hopeless that first year. I felt
Of course.
very, very hopeless. I skew hopeful, even in, like, like, my cup is 51% full. I always say, um, because I don't have rose-colored glasses. I never did, but I do. I am a generally hopeful person, but this really broke my spirit, and I had to rely on friends a lot in that first year. But it's funny, because even friends I've made in the last couple of years have watched me. A friend of mine last night was saying, like, "Oh, when I met you like a year and a half ago, you were still, like, talking a lot about it and really sad." And it's not. It's not I do get sad, and I've been a little bit sad, like going into this, like, oh, this is like really real. I'm putting this out. I guess we're not together, but like, I know we're not together. Um, but I still have sadness. Like I don't fight my grief. I wish I didn't have it, but I have a beautiful, beautiful, rich life. So I'm back in it as much as one can be under these pandemic circumstances. And I don't know if grief ever finishes. You know what I mean? I don't know if there will be a time 5 years from now when I'll be like, oh, I am recovered. I'm recovered, you know?
I think grief changes. I
It
think there's
changes. It changes.
but it changes. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm actually really good friends with my first husband now. I would never want to be married to him anymore because I know the huge problems in the relationship. And just as you said, I was part of the problem too. But he's actually our lawyer now, which is
Wow.
so funny. But it changes. It just changes. But
Changes.
I wanted
Yeah.
to go back to that thing where you were talking about where your friend said, "Oh, you kept talking about it." I think a lot of grief is telling the story and telling the story and telling the story. And it's just like the title, the story changes as you tell it, as you know more. Would you
Yeah.
say that's true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I mean, there have been, I think, right. But I think for me, writing, I don't think writing is therapy. I go to therapy. I believe in therapy. But I do think that it is a very important thing for me to, I felt like I had nothing at stake in writing these stories down, in the hopes of trying, like, both like making my day worth living, which is what writing does for me, but also like in the hopes that I would uncover something, that would be of value for myself. Um, so,
But it becomes a value for others. That's like returning to how universal a writer you are. I always say that writers are like the canaries in the coal mines where we go to the dark places and initially we go there for ourselves.
yeah,
The thing is when a writer digs deep and puts the story on the page, as
yeah,
you did, and whoops, in this fabulous book, um, that's when it becomes universal. That's when other people are reading it and thinking, me too, I felt that. Or else they're thinking, this is so true. And I'm really glad Elizabeth felt this so I don't have to. But that's the whole beauty of it.
yes.
I have a structural question to ask you.
Okay.
Everything you've written has been just wonderful. And I wanted to know, and I always ask this question, do you feel that as you move from one book to another that you've learned stuff that you can use in the next? It's a writer question.
That's a really good writer question. Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, I I hope that I think revision is a tool that I'm always kind of learning as I I I read a passage last night and I was like, "Oh, that's a really long sentence." And I have it is my inclination to write really, really long sentences, but I've also pared back my prose a lot over the years, like uh, sentences are not as long and unwieldy as they once were for whatever reason. I don't, what happens for me is that each one has kind of presented its own unique challenges that I was not setting out to, like, okay, now I'm going to try this or I'm going to
Right.
try this. It's just like I find myself in the middle of something that like maybe has some momentum and I'm like, oh, well, this is going somewhere. And but it's, why is this so much harder than the last one? Like, I didn't mean to write in, my second novel was like what I do with point of view, I almost can't even explain, because it's like a mom and a daughter having a conversation with each other. The mom is dead, but each one is telling the other what they think the other one's life story is. And so I'm having to, you know, like and it's based on me and my mom. So like I had to imagine what my mom thought my life was like, and the things that I didn't tell her, and I had to imagine what it was like, but like telling. So it was just like it's almost like a weird math thing. I was like, wait a minute, am I doing this right? Like, why did I think this was a good idea? This is really hard. And you know,
Do you ever reach a stage where you say, like, why did I think I should be a writer when it gets that hard?
well, occasionally, yes, I do think I ended up doing the right thing for me. But yes, I'm like, this is definitely not what I thought it would be. More from
No,
a
it isn't.
financial standpoint than anything else, probably.
That too, that too. Yeah, I know. I had when I was teaching high school, my students all thought that, that being a writer, you had a beach house and you were rich and you
Right. In a
traveled.
Nancy Meyers movie, that's true.
So tell us about the movie making business. They made a wonderful movie, If We Only Know So Much, which happened in the middle of all this surprising pain.
Well, it
Um,
came out. It came out.
oh,
Yeah. It came out right that year. Um, my screenwriting partner, or he became my screenwriting partner, was an old friend of mine, Donnie Ward, and Donna Lardner Ward, who I'd known for 30 years now. And he was looking to make an independent film. He's a film director and a writer. And he's like, I can't offer you any money, but I think this would make a really good film. It's a family story. It's a family story. It didn't require a lot of, budgetary concerns, which was something that I learned a lot, like, where the budget goes and why, like, how, like, why things get eaten up and why you can make a family story with minimal locations and, minimal whatever. But the writing the script was a learning experience, and that was amazing. And I had some experience in the film and TV industry before that, so which I actually left to go write fiction because I was just like, I don't know if I want to be in this business. But
it's hard.
but I always hoped to do, I always hoped that I would have a chance to write something original and have it made. And so to have that happen and have it come out good and do it with a friend, and it was wonderful. I mean, I got to be there the whole time that we were on location. It's great.
What writing advice would you give your younger self or any writer just starting out?
Well, I'll tell you what. I say this again and again, like to my students, like, if you get nothing else from me, read and write constantly. Like, both of those things. I think my younger self, like, I wish I could point my very younger self toward some of the writing that I became interested in reading kind of late in the game, like in my 30s. Like, and because that's when my writing started to get better, was when I started reading people that I was super inspired by and that were doing things that were kind of like what I wanted to do or had an instinct to do, but I was
Right.
squashing it because I thought should be more formal and, straightforward. And my brain didn't work in a straightforward way. And so I knew my straightforward stuff was like kind of boring. And when I started to read Lydia Davis, or even Lori Moore, or, Allie Smith, like earlier on, immediately my writing was like opened up because I understood, like, oh, I can play. I didn't know I could do that. The things that I loved reading as a kid were very playful. Sometimes they were like, I wasn't into fantasy or anything, but I did like kind of things that skewed dark or, absurd. I loved things that were absurd and dark when I was a kid, even if I didn't understand them. But then as I got to be a little older, I just wasn't reading. I was not, I wasn't excited by, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I wasn't excited by Jane Austen. I wasn't like, it was just not my kind of, I just wanted like something rougher around the edges, and I didn't like, nobody was pointing me toward it, and I didn't know how to get to it. So now that I'm here, I that's one of my really things that I really love, is making reading lists for my students, because I don't teach literature, but I love trying to point writers toward work that might inspire them that they haven't
Yeah.
read before. And then nothing makes me happier than when a student says, like, I can't believe I didn't read so and so before, and then I'm the
Or
one that made them read it.
or also sometimes where they'll say, "I didn't realize you could do that in a book. I thought you had to do this, 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 this," and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
realize, you know what, you make it work.
yeah,
You can do anything you want.
yeah. You
You
can.
We have an audience question. Is it hard to switch from screenwriting to writing a novel? Do you plot your stories or are you a pantser? And congratulations on your book. This is from Sue Johnson Bishop.
Thank you for thank you for the congrats. I don't know what a pantser is, but no, I do not plot. I barely, like, I joke all the time. I was like, plot. I don't know what that means. I always think of the thing George Saunders says, like, plot is just a little piece of land that you build something on. And maybe that's what it is, but that is not my strong suit. I tend to start with a couple of things: characters. I have ideas about characters, or a situation that someone might like. I often think, like, of some weird situation or circumstance, and I think, what would that be like? And that, and especially, what would it be like if this person was in this situation, and yes, it is, like, shifting those gears is definitely challenging, and I had a learning curve as a screenwriter, for sure, because I even though I had dabbled in that when I was much younger, um I learned a lot in a hands-on way from my writing partner. It's a very structure based, it's very structure based. And so certainly I play with structure, but there's, in a straightforward movie, you can't, like, structure is, there are some examples that I think are amazing, but, like, in a we were trying to just tell this family story.
Was it weird to see your characters on the screen? I mean, because I'm sure you
Only
visualize.
in the best way. In the best way. I mean, especially, like, I still will remember this moment, like, sitting in the house that we were filming in, and the actor that was playing a version of, because it's not my family, but the in that book there's three generations, and so there's, like, the kids, the parents, and then the 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 father's father, and then the father's the grandfather's mother, and the grandfather and the great grandmother are based on my father and my grandmother. And uh so to see um Loudon Wainwright coming in wardrobe, like, dressed like my dad and kind of shuffling like my dad, like, he doesn't look, he looks a little like my dad, but, like, it was just like, it was just like whoosh, like, it was wild. And anytime anybody has an opportunity to see, because I've gotten to see my work adapted on stage, and you know uh it's, especially if it's a little bit autobiographical, it's a trip. It's an amazing trip.
Yeah, it's a
There
different
should be
art
a
form.
therapy where they, like, make a play of your life and you have to see it like 10 times.
Oh my God.
That's what I thought when they did. That's when I thought, when they adapted my first book into a play.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I have two more
Yep,
questions.
yep,
One
yep.
is, and they're both questions I always ask. The first one is, what's obsessing you now and why? Beside politics and
Yeah, seriously. Um, I am very much, I'm reading a lot of nonfiction. I guess that's unsurprising. So I'm a little bit obsessed with my like, I read at Franklin Park the other night. I'm obsessed with this book, Virology, by Joseph Osmundson. Uh, it's just a really input. This is what I'm obsessed with. People that write memoir in such a way that it's not even necessarily universal, but you touch on things that, like, you bring your own experience to some things that are really important to think about. Like, there's a memoir called Easy Beauty by Chloe Cooper Jones. I can't say enough about that book, about, living in a with disability, and the way that she wrote about that, and her experience of it, and how she, you know, she too, it's not like oh, I'm all, everything is sunny and happy now at the end of the book, but just like really, really being honest, and like that combination of like honesty, talking about important things, like judgments people make, um, and virology is about viruses. It's about like it's about viruses.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about the world we live in too. It's just so anytime someone can do that, I am just like, how did you do that? How did you do that? I don't know.
I also love nonfiction, and I used to not read it. And then when I started reviewing for people, they made me the nonfiction person because everybody
Interesting.
wanted
Okay.
fiction. And I
Oh,
loved it.
yeah.
There's something wonderful about getting to experience things that you might never have picked up on your own.
Right, right, right.
It just widens your world. So my last question is, what question didn't I ask that you really wanted to talk
Oh, uh, I can't think of such a thing. I mean, we could have sat here for the whole time and talked about cardigans, but
That's right, that's right. I
um,
almost brought mine out so I could do a little fashion show. Okay, so I wanna tell everybody out there, bookshop.org. Oh, Easy Beauty by Chloe Cooper Jones is an
yes,
Elizabeth Kent Crane recommendation, and as long as we're recommending, Gina Frangella, who I mentioned, her memoir, Blow Your House Down, is also, like, yes,
another really
great,
just
great,
like
great, great.
like so smart, just
Yep,
amazing.
so smart and so brave, so, so brave. So, bookshop.org, or your local indie bookstore. You wanna look at this cover again. Whoops, let me get in the camera. It's a great cover. Did you have input on the
I
covering?
had
Or I mean, it's
a wee bit. It was their concept, but I gave them some notes, a few little
it's
notes.
great. I love it. I love it. It's just an amazing cover. So I want to thank everybody who showed up here to listen and ask questions. I want to thank our brilliant, wonderful producer and writer, Bosie Rand. Thank you, Bosie. And of course, I want to thank Betsy, Elizabeth Crane, the most. I love all her books, and
Oh,
I love her too. So see you all later. See you next time.
thank
Bye.
you so much for having me.